Welcome to the Thought Leadership Podcast, where we share insights on how you can become the go-to thought leader in your niche. I'm your host, Alejandro Sanoja, founder and personal branding consultant at Latin Empresarios, and today our guest is Carla Howard. As a keynote speaker, mentor, businesswoman, and author, Carla Howard is a welcome breath of fresh air in the all too stuffy corporate world. She embraces life and her energy is contagious. Growing up with a father in the Coast Guard, Carla and her family moved quite frequently. She often told her parents that being a military brat taught her how to adjust quickly, connect with people, and learn the unspoken rules necessary to succeed. She also learned the value of observation and active listening at an early age and brings these qualities to each of her mentorship relationships. Carla has successfully coached employees from the warehouse floor to the C-suite on how to lead and manage change, navigate emotionally charged conversations, and play the political game with integrity. She is a results-oriented leader who values truthfulness, accountability, and fun in the workplace. She is passionate about helping her clients take charge of their careers and become more strategic thinkers. Carla, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Like I mentioned before we started recording, I have so many questions. I don't know if we're going to be able to cover them all, but I recently saw a video that you posted on YouTube, which I think was great, talking about how to get started with speaking engagements. So I want to start. I have another question that I really want to ask, but I want to get your thoughts on how do you recommend people, let's say someone who is out there, they've been to Toastmasters, they know they are a good speaker, they've been invited to some places and they've had a good experience. What are those next steps to go from just doing it as a way to expand your reach and your network to actually getting paid to do it?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I struggled with that so much when I first moved into being a paid speaker. And it's funny that you mentioned Toastmasters because I really honed my speaking skills inside of Toastmasters. I think it's a fantastic organization. I I really believe that the best way to get started is by doing those free engagements. You know, we all have to kind of cut our teeth, if you will, by getting in front of smaller groups. And you're also going to be more comfortable that way. You get a chance to learn how to interact with the audience and read their energy and just really make it, even though you're the one talking, it feels like a conversation. Once you're there, it's really all about mindset. So deciding that you are now a paid speaker and then moving forward and taking actions like a paid speaker would take. So those things include filling out calls for speakers that you find online, creating your speaker package and reaching out to people you know who organize events and letting them know that you're a paid speaker. This is your signature talk theme that you speak on, or if you have one or two signature talks, and then attaching a couple of key documents like a speaker one sheet to say that, you know, this is more about me and I'd love to talk about how I can support your event. And it's in the conversation now, when you're having that conversation, that you can begin to talk about fees and other value that you can get from those engagements that set you up to be that professional speaker.
And would you say that there are different ways to approach it? Because I know I've read a lot on the topic, and different people recommend different ways of actually monetizing it, right? Some people say, hey, don't charge, just make sure that you are in front of the people who can be your ideal clients and just monetize them as clients, right? That's one way. Another way is to do workshops where you have actually specific activities and specific deliverables that you would have at the end of that activity, and people would leave with just some type of actionable insight. And then there's some that just get paid to go somewhere and give a keynote and speak, right? And you share a couple of stories. Maybe it's a motivational speaker, maybe it's just some high-level insights or even actionable items, but it's not a contingent on any particular deliverables. It's just you're just paid to be the keynote speaker at a particular event. Are there any specific approaches or differences that you've seen depending on which one of those you want to be?
there's so many different ways that you can go with being a professional speaker. And I love that you mentioned the actionable piece that we leave behind, because for me, as I work with speakers, that is key. We're there to deliver some type of a transformation, and people get all wrapped up in that and think, oh my gosh, it has to be huge. No, it doesn't. People just want to know how to get a little bit further in their journey. So even if you're doing that keynote, you should always leave them with the top 2 or 3 things that they can do to create that transformation in their lives. I think most of us that are professional speakers have done that, exactly what you're talking about, that speaking where we don't get paid, and then we have an opportunity to sell on the back end. I'm a big fan of both. So when I work with speakers, I encourage them to have the fee conversation on those events where they start out wanting you to speak for free. And there's some ways that you can do that you can kind of lean into that are comfortable. So if someone says, oh, we really don't have a speaker's budget, then I would say, I am a professional speaker and speaking is part of my revenue stream. Can we talk about how we could make it work where I have a stipend in addition to the opportunity to share my products on the back end? Because if they want a quality speaker, if they want someone who knows how to command the stage, and they're not looking for an amateur speaker, most organizations and corporations have the budget. They are reserving it for other things or for the professional speakers. So when you set yourself up to say, I am a professional speaker, I do workshops, I do keynotes, and I will leave your audience with those actionable tips to help them transform X to Y. Can we have that conversation around how we could make it work? I'd love to support your event. Speaking for free is not something that's part of my model. So how could we make that work? Because there's a lot of money we're leaving on the table when we don't get paid. So, if you could get an extra $5,000 to stand up, deliver your message, and then still have that potential to convert clients on the back end, that's way better than a free gig.
So you mentioned that opportunity of being able to promote your products. Is there any way in which you would recommend to do it? Do you just focus on, hey, let me just deliver such a great speech, such a great presentation or workshop that people actually want to look me up? Do you tee it up with just sharing your social media? Do you tee it up with just like basic knowledge on something and saying something like, well, on my website, I have 10 more resources on how you can maximize, like I share with you step 1 through 5 and 6 to 10 is on my website. Are there any specific ways to promote yourself after the talk that you find work better than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you, when I'm sitting, this is like, I'm a speaker's worst nightmare. When I go to conferences, I love going and listening to other speakers, and I will sit and just absorb the information. And I will get up and walk out if it turns into a sales pitch, because I didn't come to be pitched to all day long. That's a huge pet peeve of mine. And so whether I'm speaking at a keynote or I'm doing a workshop or some type of an afternoon breakout, I don't ever sell during my delivery. I am there to deliver value. I am there to connect. I am there to help people make the transition that they want to make in their business and their lives. And I'm very, very focused on that. The way that I sell on the back end, and always get permission beforehand, right? You never want to surprise your event organizer with some type of promotion on the back end, is I'll ask for permission in advance to share an additional resources document with the participants. And I'll ask the organization, the host, if they would prefer to send it out. Sometimes they like to include it in the online notes, like in conferences, your session will be there and there'll be a place where they can click on additional resources. And in my additional resources, I include options on how they can get free value. So I have things like a Facebook group for kind and ambitious women. That's free. Come in and join that. I have a free e-magazine. You can follow me on Instagram. So there's different ways. Oh, and LinkedIn. I always include LinkedIn because I am huge on building my platform on LinkedIn. So here's the different ways you can connect with me. Here's some free resources, and these are by page. So this is like an 8-page document. And then there's the ways that they can work with me that are back-end sales. So like the Get Paid from the Stage program, I would have a page for that. I might have a page, depending on who my audience was, for my membership for kind and ambitious female entrepreneurs. I don't talk about that from the stage. It's included in the notes, other than a very brief mention where I'll say, as we're getting close to wrapping up, not at the very end, because you want to leave them with a zinger that they're going to remember. But as we get close to the end, I'll say something like, inside the show notes, there'll be an additional resources document that you can open up that's going to have all of the information on how you can connect with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, inside of my community for kind and ambitious women. And it has the additional resources that they can purchase from me. So that will include the Get Paid from the Stage program. And depending on my audience, it's also going to include my membership for kind and ambitious women. So I won't stand on the stage and say, if you want these things, this is how you can get them. I'll simply say, you'll find the additional resources inside of your conference app if you're interested in learning how we can connect or how you can work with me. And then I'll move on, answer some questions, and then close with a really strong close. But what I never do is talk about my products, my services. It's not about me. It's about the audience and the value that I can deliver. And then that is a takeaway document that they can go look at and decide what's going to meet their needs.
Yeah, those are great points, especially the one about not leaving it to the end. Because you're absolutely right. You want to close with something really good that just remains in their memory. So just closing with, hey, by the way, you can follow me on LinkedIn, yada, yada, yada. Of course, that's not going to be as strong as something else. So I leave with that. That's a great point. And then I love the part about asking permission. I've even seen some people do it live with their audience. Say something like, hey, is it okay if I share with you some resources that I have on my website that could actually help you? And then, of course, like if they've done a good job, people are going to say yes, but it feels like way more genuine than just, like you said, straight out pitching. Now, those are all great points, Carla. I want to ask you about another one that I've seen that has happened to me particularly as well. And I imagine to other people out there when they're making that transition. How do you deal with people in your network, colleagues, people that know you, they've known you for a while, and maybe they don't know you've made that transition from, I don't know, maybe doing it as a hobby to actually you're now a professional speaker and you get paid to do it. And they thought about you, hey, they remember you being a great speaker, they have a speaking opportunity, they want to bring some speaker for a particular event or a lunch and learn, and they think about you and they contact you. How do you deal with that uncomfortable situation of letting them know that, yes, you're happy to do it, but you actually need to get paid for it because you're a professional speaker?
Yeah, I've had that happen. And then I've also been in a situation where, particularly with my workshops, people will argue with me about the price. So, they'll say something like, oh, well, this firm charges this much, or I figured out the dollars per hour. And if we do that, you're going to make, this much an hour and we only pay this much. So my coaching to speakers is this. First of all, you're not a dollar per hour employee. You are delivering value from the stage. You are delivering value based off of your lifetime experiences, based off of all of your experiences in corporate, based off of all of the work that you have done to get to the point that you are. And that is not a per hour fee. That is a value delivery, and you're delivering to multiple people. You might be delivering value to 300 people at a conference. And you can't equate that to an hourly fee. So when I'm having those conversations with past colleagues or friends where, they are saying, hey, I've got this great opportunity, and they're maybe not quite clued into the fact that you've transitioned, or they don't know what to expect for your speaker fees, my conversation goes something like this. Oh, Alejandra, I'm so excited that you reached out to me. Let's talk first about the the event, exactly what is it, what value would you like for me to deliver, and what would you like your audience to walk away knowing or doing differently when they leave the event. And then you're going to share with me all of the good stuff, and I'll say, okay, great, here's the framework that I'm thinking will work best for that. Now let's talk about my fees. My speaking fees are $5,000 for the day. So you can use me for the full day. I can do a 1-hour keynote, or I can do breakouts for your organization. And since you're local, I won't add travel and expense on top of that. Is that something that's within your budget? So you state it matter-of-factly, or if there is travel and expense, you can say my day rate is $8,000, and here's the things I can do for you. And that brings up another point. I am a really big fan of a day rate. We're not like a parking meter that somebody's, slotting coins in, depending on if it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour and a half. If I'm working for an organization, I'm really going to be there for the full day, whether I'm flying there or I'm driving there. And it brings that organization more value if I can deliver more. So you can use me for just the keynote, or you can use me for a table breakout, or I can facilitate a panel. It's your choice. This is my day rate. So that's how I would handle it. I would be very matter-of-fact about the value I could deliver, and then be very matter-of-fact about the cost of that value.
Yeah, that's a great point to explain it like that. Something that worked for me is I now have my speaker page, and I just like, hey, here are some of the details like time. There's some questions there like, hey, here are some questions that could help us better understand how to deliver that value. And it has date, time, expectations, and then it has the budget for this event is, and there's like some ranges there. So that facilitates that, but I like that approach as well. Now, Carla, this is of course an uncomfortable conversation to have for some people, right? Like talking about money. And in preparation for this interview, I saw a line that I loved I think it's in your profile on your website, from over explaining to influencing.
Yes.
Now, in my case, it has helped me that we transition to focus on inbound. So through content, I saw a big change in my career when people were coming to us because they found us somewhere. So questions like, could you tell me a little bit about your previous experience? What has results of other clients? I don't know, what your age, your background, that disappears when people see you as an authority. Their focus, the trust is already there, and they focus on some other not so obvious questions. Of course, to do it the inbound way, maybe you have to be patient and wait a lot. So I was curious if you had what was your framework for going from over explaining to influencing?
Oh man, we could talk for hours about that topic. So I really struggled early in my corporate career with over explaining. And the sad part about that is when we give too much detail, we actually look like we don't know what we're doing, versus appearing strategic and confident in what we're sharing. So the idea about going from over explaining to influencing is this: when we're influencing, we're seen as strategic. And when we're over explaining, we're seen as very tactical. And we bring a higher value when we're seen as strategic. So it's really important to make that transition. The best way to do that is to share your ideas in 3 sentences or less. And I mean 3 very concise, clear sentences. And then you follow it up with a question. You can ask something like, what questions do you have? What else would you like to know about whatever the topic is? So if we were talking about a speaking presentation, I would say something like, what other questions do you have about the content and the value that I'll deliver in this talk? And then be silent and let them ask the question. I heard a saying many, many years ago that has stuck with me, probably because it made me catch my breath when I heard it, which was my signal that it was something I needed to pay attention to. And it is this: Nobody wants or needs to know everything that's going on inside of your head. And we have an overwhelming urge sometimes to share all of it because we think it's going to justify or explain, in this case, our price. And it doesn't. You're a professional speaker. Your speaking fee is $9,000. This is the value you deliver. What other questions do you have for me? One of the biggest surprises for me in my speaking career is how often I say to an event organizer when they say, hey, Carla, what is your speaking fee? And I say, it's $9,000 plus 2 nights stay at the hotel at the venue. And they say, okay, that sounds great. I literally sit there and think, well, what's not okay then? Like, am I leaving money on the table? I don't know, probably because it's a quick yes. And yet we question ourselves on the value, or are we charging too much, or this or that? You know what? Get out there and charge for the value that you're delivering. The market will tell you whether or not that's a reasonable price.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it brings to mind so many things. One of which is that there's this great book on pricing that talks about the difference between the typical lowest price strategy, right? Like Walmart and those kind of businesses. That's one. Then you have premium prices. And we know a lot of businesses like that. And then the third is in luxury. And the remarkable thing is that the difference between luxury and premium is not the quality, it's the demand. You could have a product that is the same, it has the same features. If just more people want it, that the amount of supply that there is, that's why it's priced higher. So that's a great point that sometimes we think that we have to explain and prove the value. And it's just like, well, if a lot of people want you to speak at a different events, you only have X amount of hours that you can speak. So that's just a point that you can use to raise the prices.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about speaking at an event. So I live in Phoenix. I just booked an event in Chicago that I am getting $9,000 for, plus 2 nights stay at a hotel. And it's really 3 days of work for me, right? Because I'm going to have to fly from Phoenix to get there the day before. I never arrive at a place the same day in case there's a problem with the flight. So I'm going to fly in the day before. Sure, I can do a little bit of work on the plane. And then I'm going to be at the event. I'm delivering in the morning, and I'm going to be present all day. I'm going to different speakers, breakouts. I'm going to interact with the audience because I feel like as a speaker, it's my job to help make that event successful. So I'm not going to speak and then run up to my room and y'all are never going to see me again. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at lunch. I'm going to answer questions. I'm available to the participants. And then I fly out the next day. So that's 3 days of work. I had a situation where recently I got asked to come and facilitate a workshop, and I gave my price, and they came back and said, we really can't meet that. The most I could give you is $5,000. Sometimes I will take less depending on what's on my schedule, how much I really want to do the event, who that audience is, right? Like, we get to decide where we want to be flexible. In this case, I decided it wasn't a right fit for me. So I said, thank you very much. If you get the additional funds, please let me know. And I appreciate you thinking of me. And then I turned right around and took a $5,000 event from somebody else the following week because it was my ideal audience. And I've spoken to this audience before, and I love this community of women. It's for the women in electronics. I love this community of women, and they're so engaging. And I wanted to do it. So sometimes it doesn't even always necessarily make sense on paper, but if you follow your intuition and you really make those judgment calls when they make sense for you, they make sense for your brand and your the work that you love doing, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I love that point, and I think you talk about that in one of your videos where you say that, hey, if it's a cause that is important to you, if it's an organization that well, maybe at that point you can do it for free because there's other value being created, like it's in line with your purpose and your mission, and it brings you a feel-good moment of being able to deliver the value. And it's okay if you don't want to do it. I think it's Seth Godin that says you either do full price or free. And if it's free, you decide your terms. I love that you decide when you get to be flexible instead of letting the other people do it. Now, Carla, I also wanted to ask you, in line with this, we are talking only about uncomfortable conversations. And you have another line that I love because I used to struggle with this a lot. I thought that the politics game was nonsense, that you should just focus on being good, delivering results, and everything else is a waste of time. And as it happens with time, with learning, with experience, you learn that there's actually value in it because and you have a great line that I want to say, but when you do it the right way, it's about influence, it's not about manipulation. So you have a line that says, play the political game with integrity. Could you please expand on how is it that you can play the politics game with integrity?
Yeah, and that has a lot to do with both inside of a corporation and outside if you're an entrepreneur or a speaker. And it is really all around speaking your truth, telling your own stories and doing it in a way that does not pass judgment on other people. And it's a very, very tricky balance. So I have a TED Talk called Picture a Leader, Is She a Woman? And inside of the TED Talk, I talk about how when people are asked to picture a leader, like 95% of them picture a man. And there was a study where they actually asked a huge group of people to draw a picture of a leader, and almost every one of them drew a picture of a man. And so I did my own experiment with my daughters and my granddaughter, and they drew pictures of men. And it really led me to say, wow, we have some work to do so that our daughters see themselves as leaders. And in the talk, I'm very careful to say, boys should see themselves as leaders too. And we have spent so much time playing the blame game, where we blame men because they're not supporting women. We blame women because they're not standing up and, taking that seat at the table. We blame teachers because of the way that we are instructing in school. What if we let go of the blame and we started having different conversations and we helped our daughters see themselves as leaders? What a difference could that make? And that's important to me. That is personal to me. And it's not saying men are bad or men shouldn't see themselves as leaders. It's a strong statement that we need to have different conversations. And I was really focused on sharing that message with that. I didn't want anybody to listen to that video and feel blame. I wanted them to feel included in the conversation. So for me, that is an example of how we share our personal experiences. We stand up for the things that we believe in, and we do it in an inclusive way so that we're inviting conversation and we're not saying this group is bad or this group is evil and I'm right or my group is right. We've got to move away from that and find ways to have conversations that are impactful and don't leave people with finger pointing.
Now, that's a great point, Carla. And I want to go deeper into that because there's so much going on in the conversation around those topics. And I want to be super careful in the way I talk about it. But there's a lot of research I've read. For example, women, they invest more in families, right? They're actually better decision takers because I don't remember the book, but it was basically a research that said that men estimate their probabilities of winning. Like men that run for office, sometimes they don't have a chance and they still spend a bunch of resources on the campaign, versus women, in the majority of the cases, on the average, they run only when they have a really good chance of winning. They assess risk in a better way. Probably, I'm sure there's a lot of the reptilian brain there that women have to actually assess risk a little bit better in the natural state of the world, right? So what do you usually recommend to women when they're navigating those environments, understanding what is out there, right? Like we have those biases that 90-something% of the people, they think of a leader, they think of a man. How do you recommend them to understand first the game before going in and playing it?
Yeah. So if are we talking specifically about corporate America or entrepreneurs or kind of all of the above?
I would say all of the above. If you want to go into each in particular or one in particular, that'd be great. But just in general, what are some of the basic steps that somebody has to take before deciding to play one of those politics or corporate games?
Yeah, so I would really encourage women to watch that negative voice in their heads, because that is really the thing that holds us back terribly. It's often referred to as the inner critic. I have a keynote talk that's called "Is Your Inner Critic Designing Your Future?" And if we're not careful, we invite our inner critic in to design our future and decide what we are capable of. So my coaching to women is really watch that negative voice in your head, recognize when it's showing up, rewrite the story so that you're not letting that limiting self-belief stop you, and try things. You know, we get so wrapped up in all of the bad things that are going to happen and the things that we have to be careful of and the things that we have to be afraid of. I live in Arizona, I live in the desert, and every morning I go for a walk and there are rattlesnakes out. You know, I live out in the mountains. And so I don't let that stop me from going for a walk. I get out at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and I go for a walk and I scan and I pay attention. I'm aware of my surroundings, and I've not gotten bit by a rattlesnake. Now I could, they're out there. The chances are actually really, really slim. And I could sit in my house and say, oh, I wish I could go for a walk, but I'm afraid I'm going to get bit by a rattlesnake. When I would miss out on all of those opportunities, and it takes just a little bit of caution to keep me safe. Our careers, building a business, all of the things we do are no different. Everything that we're dreaming up in our heads that could go wrong actually could go wrong, right? They're not just, you know, Martians are going to land and, you know, steal my business. That's not the crazy stuff we dream up. We think of real things that are risk that could happen. And there's probably about a 2 or 3% chance that it's actually going to happen, and we can put some safeguards in place. So my coaching is really listen to your heart, recognize what it is that you want to do, and take steps towards that with some guardrails, some simple things you can do that are going to keep that worst case scenario that you've kind of got spinning through your mind from happening. Just like me on my walks in the morning, I still go, I'm careful, I enjoy my walks, and so far I've not gotten bit by a rattlesnake.
That's good. That's good. We want to keep you safe.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a great point, right? Like understanding what's out there. And how would you advise someone to make a decision between or balance? I think making a decision between these two topics, it's a fallacy that you have to pick. You can do both, but how would you balance focusing on changing the game to make it more fair, which is a lot of it is happening nowadays, versus, hey, this is the game and you have to play it. Like, I'll give you an example. I was having a conversation with a friend, and I shared with her some research that's out there that I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something like efficient women, capable women are usually seen as bossy and disliked. And that is a fact. I
Yes.
told her, you have to know you are that type of woman. You are a leader. So you have to know that as you navigate life, a lot of people are not going to like you just because this bias is out there. So you have to already know that when you're going into a room, that's going to happen. So do you decide to get things done, or do you want to be liked? Right. And for example, I know maybe when I mention my name, maybe when people see their background, oh, he has an accent. Oh, he's an immigrant. I know there's going to be some biases there, and I can complain all day about it, or I can just like focus on doing my best and focusing on what I can control. A lot of the things is deciding on the circles you're going to be at, right? Like, don't be at circles that are always judging people on superficial things, right? Like, go to circles and areas where people take a more time to get to know others, and try to, sometimes we can't, it happens automatically, but to try to eliminate that quick judgment and that quick thinking and being open. So when you're working with women and there's all this going on out there, how do you help them navigate that balance between, yes, be an advocate for change and to make things fair, but also, hey, just be really good at the game and beat everybody else, and that's how you demonstrate that you're better?
I love this question so much. I'll tell you first a setup for the answer. So Harvard Business Review did a study many years ago where they asked people, would you rather work with someone who is competent or likable? And when I read that, I thought for sure, oh, it's going to be competent, right? Everybody wants to work with someone who's competent. No, it was likable. And I thought, oh my gosh. It went on to say people who are able to do both, people who are competent and likable, are lovable stars. And this is what I tell the women that I work for. I talk about this a lot from the stage. I want women to move into the place where they're a lovable star. And we do that through connection. We do that through conversation. So let's talk about the likable piece first. We do that through connection, through conversation, through keeping our word, through remembering small things that keep us connected to people. The competent side is where our strength is. So part of that is speaking with confidence. And I see so many women try to navigate that sticky situation that you've described by not coming in strong. So for example, if I'm in a meeting and there's 5 people in the room and there's a senior man in the room and my boss is in the room and a couple of colleagues, and they're asking for people's opinions. If a strong woman in the room has an opinion, sometimes she'll state it in such a way that makes it sound like, well, I have all the answers, right? Like they're coming right in super strong. And that's where you get that rub where people have a hard time hearing what she's sharing. Most of the time, what I see women do is try to soften their message so that they can maintain that likability. And they'll say things like, well, this might not be the right idea, but I was thinking that maybe if we try X. They don't know how to come into the conversation, maintaining likability and showing up as a strong, confident woman. So one of the ways that I recommend they do that is by coming in with hip pocket phrases that they already have ready. So you can say something like, I see it differently. Here's what I'm thinking, and share your idea. The beauty of that statement is it doesn't mean that somebody in the room is wrong and you're right, or you're not saying, I have a better idea. You're opening up for conversation and collaboration. Really focusing on how are you going to add to the conversation in a way that opens up the conversation for collaboration, sets you up as a subject matter expert, you have an opinion, and you're maintaining that likability is super important for women, especially women in corporate or women who are really serving in that role as CEO of her business.
That's such a great point, having those key phrases that help frame the situation. It reminds me of in improv comedy, it's difficult, right? You have to make it up on the go. You have no idea what's going on. And I've noticed, I picked it up first to practice English. I hated the silly component of it, and now I love it. But I've noticed, for example, that the super experienced people, they have object work, kind of like go-to object work that they use in when you're experienced, you know that they don't really know what they're going to say, but that just makes space for them to think a little bit before actually making that next move. So I think that's a great point to having those phrases. I think another one that I've heard is, I might be wrong about this, but, and then you share your idea to kind of like preempt that you don't know it all, right? Like, I might be wrong about this, but what if X, and you just bring your idea. So I love those having those key phrases that you can use at those moments. Now, I think this all connects with that phrase that you have about silencing the inner critic. And you talk about visualization, meditation. You are in Arizona, which is really close to, which is where Sedona is known as one of the places where there's a lot of focus on meditation and visualization. So, Carla, could you share with us some of the techniques that you would recommend people to work on silencing that inner critic?
Yes, the visualization and the meditation is a big part of how I just move through my day. And so I use that to really anchor and ground me in the things that I want for my life. love living my dream life. And I'm really focused on doing that every single day. And one of the ways that I center myself and really quiet that voice is through meditation and visualization. And a couple different ways. So sometimes I'll sit out on the patio and I have a visualization audio that I love to listen through that just kind of guides me through a thought process. The other thing, and I think this is really key for people who struggle with meditation and visualization, is when I go for my walks, I will focus on the sounds of nature. It just helps me to quiet my mind. You know, we get so busy and we get so much happening inside of our minds that sometimes it's hard to just take a deep breath and just, you know, start the day with a little bit of space. So I love going for a walk and I'll listen really closely to birds. I'll hear the lizards running on the ground. I'll hear the wind kind of moving through. And if I focus on sounds, it really helps me to quiet my mind. And that does help with the inner critic work, because when your mind is quiet, you can actually hear the messages. And I feel like a lot of times the danger of our inner critic is it just turns into white noise. Like we don't even realize all of the negative messages we're sending ourselves every single day. And when we become aware of them, that's when we can stop and go, wait a minute, that's my inner critic. That's not the truth. That's fear talking. And we can reframe that story. So when we do those things, what happens is we take different actions during the day. There's not any big magic to it, but our thoughts change the way we feel. And when we change the way we feel, we take different actions. So naturally, we're going to have different results at the end of the day. So that's kind of how the meditation and visualization works hand in hand. When we learn how to quiet our mind, we actually hear all of that negative mess that we keep feeding ourselves, and we can then take proactive action to recognize it, kind of push it out of the way, create a new story, and then move forward.
And I mean, we could talk hours about this, and I'm so in line with what you're saying, but I also want to keep in mind nowadays it's a little bit more out there in the mainstream, but I also know that you have to be able to navigate it in a way, not because you want to hide who you are and what you want to share, but if you really want the message to get to people, you have to share it in a way that people accept it. So in your experience, how do you bring this topic of meditation and visualization when you're working with people in the corporate world, so that they understand that it's a tool that they can use, for example, to create space in that impulse before you make the response about your pricing, create space to decide to another response from people, right? Like you're in a difficult meeting, difficult conversation. Maybe there's a man doing something to a woman, and before she reacts the natural way, hey, take a moment. You actually have different choices that you can, take a moment to pick the phrase, right? Like I have all these phrases that I know I could use. Let me just create a second here instead of like giving the typical response to actually use this phrase. So how do you navigate that conversation in the corporate world so that people embrace this mindfulness as a tool that they can use to actually be better in the material world?
I think the key to that is really understanding what is it that they struggle with. So you kind of shared a couple of things that they might be struggling with. So if I'm working with a group and they say, you know, I get it, Carla, but I really struggle when I'm in the moment to think about what phrase should I use? Like, do you have any recommendations for me? That's a perfect segue to say, taking a moment in the morning to really clear your mind, have that quiet space, is going to allow you to let that creativity in. And that's the piece where 5, 10, 15 minutes of meditation and learning how to get centered again very quickly is going to help you in that situation. If I'm talking to a senior leader and that senior leader says, oh man, you know, I just get really upset and, you know, angry in this situation. Well, it's the same thing. You know, we can have the conversation to say, what I find really helps me stay centered is, how do I get to that quiet place when I feel that anger start to bubble up? And we can practice that through meditation in the morning. So I think understanding what is it that they're struggling with, and if it is something that's emotion or stress driven, which, let's face it, most of the things that we struggle with in life are emotion or stress driven. It's a perfect door to say, and what are you doing to help deal with that stress that you're feeling? And, if they are like, yeah, it's something I really struggle with, then we can say, I have a suggestion. Do I have permission to share it with you? And usually they'll say, well, of course. Have you ever tried meditation? Here's what I've found. So I think connecting it to the struggle that they're having and the outcome that they want is the best way for people to hear that message.
Yeah, there's so much more that can be done when you can create that space to select the option that you want to share. And that's how I saw it at the beginning. I did not like the spirituality component of everything that was next to meditation, and now I love it. So it's definitely a journey. And that's why I was saying that if you were to come to me, I don't know, 5-10 years ago and told me that you need to meditate and find your purpose and your meaning, I would say that's all BS. You just need to get things done. So that's why I'm always mindful. Okay, if I want to get the Alejandro of the past, to navigate to this position, I need to be really careful of how I invite him into this world. And that brings a point that I also wanted to ask you about, that it's related to mentors and coaches. Because what I found is that everywhere people talk about the value of a mentor, and there's no doubt about it. But sometimes, and it's hard to actually find one that aligns with you or someone that you really look up to. And what I found is that the coaches are another great avenue to have someone that can guide you until you find that ideal mentor, right? Because everybody would want that Mr. Miyagi, that Yoda, who is guiding you to achieve a higher level of professionalism, of enlightenment, or whatever it is that you want to achieve that they have achieved. But until you find them, I found that working with coaches, it's another great way to start looking for that mentor. In your experience, how do you help people navigate that process of either finding a mentor or working with a coach, and understanding that these are people that can guide you because they've already traveled that journey?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is you want out of the relationship, and that's super important. So there's 3 different, I would say, support people at some point in your career you're going to need: a mentor, a coach, and a sponsor, and they fill a very, very different role. So let's talk about a coach first. True coaches typically are going to ask you questions, and you're going to discover the answers by answering their questions. They're not going to give you a lot of their personal experience, and that's by design. So professional coaches are very careful not to say, here's what I recommend, or here's what I've seen happen in my life. There's also coaches that are technical coaches. So if there's a skill that you want to learn, they're really a focused teacher, and they're going to give you instructions on how to do that skill or how to perform that thing that you want to learn how to perform. Mentors, on the other hand, are that person who has typically achieved some level of success that you want to achieve in your life. And that person should be someone that you really respect. You respect the way it appears as though they have risen to that level. You respect the way that they interact with others. And you want to build a relationship where you can learn from them, what they've done. And they're the ones who are really going to share with you their experience, what they've done that's worked, what hasn't worked, and give you some guidance along the way. That's a very invested relationship. And the other one is a sponsor. So I always look at sponsors as someone who's going to bring you up behind closed doors. It's typically men at this point in corporate America, because there's way more men at the higher ranks. And that sponsor is going to say, hey, for Project XYZ, I think Carla Howard could do a great job. Let's talk about how we could give her an opportunity to really come in and show us what she can do. Because the biggest opportunities are typically not put up on a job board. Those decisions are made behind closed doors, where decision makers are talking about talent. They're talking about who's ready. They're talking about who's going to take the next high profile assignment or role. And you need somebody in that room who's going to bring you up, right? So really thinking about where is it I'm in my career and what kind of help do I need is the place to start, because all of those support people play a different role. And I've had all of them at different times in my life. The other thing is you can outgrow your coach. You can outgrow your mentor. It's easy to stay with a mentor for too long, right? Because you learn what you can learn from them. You can continue that relationship. You can continue to meet for coffee, and you're probably going to need a mentor at the next level to help you get to the next level of your career. So it is really on us as the person who is building our support team, and that is what you're doing when you're looking for these people, to know going in, what do I want? Who's ideal to provide that to me? And how can I approach that person in a way that I make this a relationship and valuable to them as well? So those are the key things to think about as you're building that support team.
Carla, there's a great point you mentioned there that, and we could take this in many directions, but you said there's a time when you're going to have to level up in those coaching and mentorship relationships because you've learned everything you can learn from that person. You said, yes, you can meet for coffee, but you need to make sure you're working and you're aligning with somebody else who can actually, who wants to help you and who can help you to the next level. Could you share some of the steps you can take to, let's say you've been meeting with someone on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis. There's kind of a formal mentorship coaching relationship. Let's say it's not paid, but it's kind of like formal. How do you navigate that change with that person so that you can actually free up the time to make the transition, but also be grateful and treat them with respect because they've been able to help you get to where you are today?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think there's a couple different ways you can go about it, depending on your relationship with a person. And I'm a big fan. Brene Brown has a saying, and it is that being clear is being kind, and being unclear is being unkind. So I believe strongly in clarity. So I would have a conversation with that person and say, oh my gosh, I have so enjoyed these weekly meetings. I've learned so much. You taught me X, Y, Z. And as a result of that, I've done these following things. And out of respect for both of our time, I'd love to move our meetings from once a week to once a month so that I can continue to keep you updated on my progress and I can continue to learn from you. So it's a kind way of maintaining that relationship and moving away from that weekly meeting. If you're already meeting once a month, you can say, I'd love to still meet with you quarterly so that we can keep each other updated. This relationship is important to me. And leave it at that. Remember, you don't have to over-explain. You simply thank them for their time, demonstrate what you've learned and what you're doing with it, and what you propose to be the new cadence going forward. That's one approach. And that would be the one that would work for me, is that honest, open conversation. If, let's just say, the person you're meeting with has made a couple of comments that have made you feel like, eek, I think I'm kind of intruding on their time at this point, then you can say, I know that you're busy and I respect that. And during our conversations, you shared a couple of times that, meeting this frequently is difficult. How would you feel about once a quarter? Would that be a better meeting cadence for you? So I think depending on what your conversations have been is going to guide the conversation. Be clear, thank them for their time, demonstrate what you've done with what they've shared with you, and propose what the new meeting structure might be.
Yeah, you make up a great point in the noticing what the other person is saying, and we can connect that back to meditation and mindfulness, right? Because if you're only listening to give an answer to what the other person is saying, you're never going to catch those moments where they're telling you that it's actually a little bit uncomfortable for them to meet in that cadence. And so many great points, Carla, and I have questions for hours. But I want to be mindful because we've talked about a lot. We've talked about how to start charging for speaking and navigating those uncomfortable conversations, then how to navigate the difficult conversations of over explaining to influencing. Same with corporate America, how women can rise, how to use visualization, so many topics. And when people ask you, what do you do? What is your actual answer?
You know, it's funny. I struggled with this for like years because I have so many different ways that I support people. And so the way that I answer that today is this: I help people get from where they are today to where they want to be. Now, how do I do that? I do that through a variety of programs. We talked a little bit about how to get paid from the stage. So I have a Get Paid from the Stage 6-week program where I teach emerging speakers and people who are speaking for free or low dollar how to get paid the value they deliver. I've got my my membership for kind and ambitious female entrepreneurs, where I help women build the businesses of their dreams. Now you look at those on the outside and you're like, hey, Carla, those don't link up at all. So let's throw a third one in the mix. I also am a strategic change leader. And so I lead mergers and acquisitions for mid to large size companies. Well, now when you add all three of those together, it makes no sense at all until you look at that overall framework. I help people get from where they are today to where they want to be tomorrow. And I do that through a variety of services and products.
Now, you've mentioned several different audiences there. Is there
Yes.
anyone that is your ideal? You mentioned helping businesses navigate those transitions, helping people get paid, helping people navigate their corporate careers. Is there anyone in particular that you'd say, if I could only work with one of these audiences, these ideal clients, who would that be?
Oh man, that is hard. And I have been asked that, this won't surprise you at all, by business coaches, because they take a look at my model and they say, okay, girlfriend, this doesn't make any sense at all. You need to pick one and go all in. I have truly such a passion for all of them that I don't have one. That, like my corporate client, I'm working with a corporate client today to manage acquisitions. I've been with this client for 2 years and I love this company. The leaders are kind and thoughtful. The work that they're doing is a mission that's, near and dear to my heart. So I'm not going to give that up. I love helping women create the businesses of their dreams. I'm not going to give that up. And keynote speaking, oh my gosh, I love delivering messages from the stage and helping people make those transitions we talked about. And it's very, very lucrative. People need more speakers who can come in and do that. So I don't really have one, which makes marketing and attracting my ideal audience very, very tricky. So the way that I navigate that is I create the demand for my corporate, we'll call it my corporate services. So leading change and mergers and acquisitions through relationships. I've been in that field for over 20 years, and I have long-standing relationships where executives are constantly calling me or writing me and bringing me in. So I do zero marketing for that because the demand is there and it's steady. I have a free group for kind and ambitious women inside of Facebook. So it's called the Sparkle and Rise community. And I talk about my membership there. People join me from that and through my Instagram account and also through LinkedIn. So I do talk about the membership there. And I talk about my keynote speaking, primarily my keynote speaking and my Get Paid from the Stage program, because those are tight, right? From the outside in, you can look at that and say, oh, I see how those two are related. She's a keynote speaker and she teaches other people how to get paid for that. I talk about that a lot on LinkedIn. And so that, because that's where that audience is and that's where I connect with them. So I think the trickiest part of having all those verticals of business is really honing in on how do I connect with and attract my audience, and it is different for all three.
That makes a lot of sense. And you do share great value in all of those fronts, because I know I've been taking notes and I have a lot of actionable insights that I take home, and I'm sure the audience will. Carla, Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience? We'll link to the community and to your website. Anything else that you think, any actionable insights or any parting words that you would like to share?
The final thoughts that I would have for the audience is this: whatever your dream life is, whatever that vision you have in your mind of what would my perfect life look like, that is achievable through small steps. It might be, speaking from the stage and earning an income doing that and traveling. It might not. It may be something else entirely. You may simply want a side hustle, or you may want to retire early. Whatever it is on your heart that would create your dream life, it is 100% achievable. And we do the achieving through the mindset work, through doing the visualization, through doing the meditation, and then every day taking action. And if something comes up and you think, if I did that, that would get me closer, and it's scary, that's probably the thing you need to go do next. Small steps will completely dissipate that fear. As you step into the thing that you're afraid of, you'll notice that you kind of look around and say, well, that wasn't so scary. I think I can go a little bit further. And before you know it, you have taken the steps that have completely transformed your life.
Well, thank you very much, Carla, for that message. And it is true, the best things in life are on the other side of fear. We appreciate your time. I know I had a great time. So hopefully we'll maybe able to have a second conversation at some point, because I have a list of many other questions that I would like to cover, but we want to be mindful of your time. So thank you very much. And for anybody out there listening, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in the next episode.